Barbara Peters. Welcome to this episode of the Criminal Calendar. I've really been looking forward to today. We have a Renaissance kind of guy as our guest, Stephen Hunter. Hi.
Hello.
Are you going to rate this show, or do you only do movies?
I only do movies, but I tend to overvalue my own appearance, so I'll probably give it 19 stars. How's that?
I think that's a wonderful idea. Actually, I was totally fascinated going to the internet and looking at your Wikipedia bio, which, as you point out, assembles a lot of information that people couldn't find. That you're generally regarded as rating the movies that you critique lower than the average bear?
Yeah, it's not an extraordinary gap. I just I think maybe it's increased this year for some reason. There were a lot of thrillers that didn't particularly pleased me that seemed to send the majority of critics dancing in the streets. And I don't know if I'm getting older and sourer and crankier and stupider, or if they're, you know, young and foolish and insipid. I don't know what the mechanism is that accounts for that. I just don't know. I mean, I go to the movies. I don't think about the big picture. You know, that doesn't do me any good. And I just watch the movie and I go back to the office, and part of my life is writing these little essays on each movie I've seen, and, you know, I don't think a lot about it. It's just what I do in my life, and I do it. And when it's all totaled up, I'm always fascinated by the outcome, because they see patterns that I don't feel. You know, I don't feel that I'm 8% more negative than the other critics. I'm just calling the shots as the movies, you know, as they come before me.
How long have you been the film critic at the Washington Post?
I have been the film critic of the Post for a little over 10 years, and before that I had 16 years as the film critic of the Baltimore Sun. So all told, I've been doing this about 26 years. A lot of movies.
Boy, that is a lot of movies.
And most critics they do burn out. And I don't know. I mean, I keep a lot of, I just don't know if I'm burned out or not. I mean, I don't feel that my energy output is down. I don't feel that my crankiness is age-related. Maybe I've always been cranky. I just haven't had so many people around willing to tell me. Who knows these things? I don't feel burned out. Maybe I am. You know,
well,
maybe.
I only ask because there's a wonderful end to your book. There's a epilogue or acknowledgement, whatever you want to call it, in which you point out that part of the inspiration for writing The 47th Samurai, which I think is certainly your most energetic novel in lots of ways, is the fact that you were so bummed out on movies until you suddenly watched one of these great samurai films.
That's exactly what happened. You know, nobody wants to hear a movie critic complain, because these are one of the best jobs in Western civilization. The only drawback that I've discovered is there are no groupies. I mean, that seems wrong. Doesn't that seem wrong to you? I don't know. Anyway, but it's a phenomenon of things that come and go. In other words, you seem to get a season of good films, and then there'll be a dry period of a few months when the films just get stupid and banal and trite and immature. And that's when you have these little epiphanies of grief, and you say to yourself, you know, I'm an adult male approaching the state of being an old adult male, and here I am racing around a beltway to get to a movie called Freddy Kills Them All Part 4, you know, and you have sort of a disconnect between your life. So at any rate, it was a sort of in a mood of despair like that I accidentally, or not accidentally, that as part of my job, I saw a movie called Twilight Samurai by a Japanese filmmaker named Yoji Yamada, and it was fabulous. It ended up as my best movie of that year, and it just set me off on a quest, because the imagery, I hadn't really looked at samurai in a long time, and the imagery and the ideas and the themes seemed really fresh and dynamic. So I started buying bootleg samurai films and classic samurai films, and you know, every sort of samurai artifact I could get my fingers on. My poor heroic wife is now lying in bed, not merely with a man who cleans guns, but a man who cleans guns while watching sword fight movies until 4 in the morning. I don't know how she put up with that,
I'm really impressed that you remarried, given
well,
this picture.
It's getting shaky. No, it's not. It's a fine marriage. She's a wonderful woman. It just sort of totally possessed my imagination. Now, I did take some time off. I wrote a book, which we have right here, called American Gunfight.
Right.
That was a 2-year project, and that took me out of it for a while. I actually missed it, and that book was not easy to write, and at various moments of crisis in it, I just told myself that I couldn't wait to get back into samurai. And when it was finally over, I just jumped in with both feet and held my nose and sank to the bottom and just drowned in samurai.
What was it about the samurai? Was it the imagery? Was it the
partially
technique?
It's the energy, fabulous energy in samurai films. Partially it's the sort of the attractiveness of what I would call the kinesthetics of the fighting. That is, the fighting with those long two-handled swords is very stylized, it's very dramatic, it's different than any other tradition of sword fighting. I've always loved sword fighting in movies. It's one of the real guilty pleasures of movie going. Particularly, I grew up in the 40s and the 50s and sort of the last era of the swashbucklers. And so I did see movie sword fights, and for many years I thought that the sword fight between Charlton Heston and I don't know who the guy was in El Cid was the best sword fight I've ever seen. But there are, Basil Rathbone versus Errol Flynn in several films, Tony Curtis versus Kirk Douglas in The Vikings, a great adventure film. At any rate, I really like sword fighting, and I had a feeling that I wanted to write a sword book, so that came into it. And then the other thing is the sort of absolutism of the samurai code, which insists on perfect obedience, even unto death, by the samurai to his lords. And the filmmakers have used that both literally, which they've understood it and they've admired it, but they've also used it ironically, in which they've pointed out how corrupt and how weak men and greedy men could misuse it and extract from their followers things that their followers don't want to do. And then finally, I guess the last thing was, a lot of it was zany. I mean, you run into lines like, "Please, my lord, execute me immediately," that you'd never hear in an American film. I thought that was, it was just very strange. And I also, I mean, there are other things. I love the clothes. I mean, I think those guys really look cool with the ponytails and the multi-layered bathrobes and the flip-flops, and these guys are riding on horseback and fighting major battles in flip-flops. I just thought, wow, that's some kind of macho. And I wanted, I mean, my thoughts were primitive. I wanted to be Toshiro Mifune for a while. That's obviously not going to happen. And then I got attracted to a director named Hideo Gosha, sort of the Don Siegel of the samurai film. He was a director that no one thought was particularly special while he was making his movies, and then he died. And instead of going away, people began looking at his movies afresh and seeing how brilliant and how brilliantly structured and photographed and how deeply and powerfully entertaining they were. And I found that, I just really like that. I mean, I've always been attracted to what you might call the hack genius, like Raymond Chandler, who's both a pulp detective novelist and an icon of American literature. I love those dualities, and I like outlaw directors who make, rogue films, extremely violent films, and when the years pass, they're the ones that are remembered, and all sort of the safe guys who were beloved by the studios and all that stuff. We forget about them. And so I was very attracted to the milieu. So my thinking took me from being a samurai star to directing a samurai movie, realizing those were pretty impossible, to thinking about writing a samurai novel, to finally realizing that my Bob Lee Swagger and Earl Swagger series was ideally set up for a kind of a samurai continuum, because Earl had fought in the Pacific in World War II, and it was entirely logical that he would have a Japanese sword.
Right.